All right. Well, let's get started here. Hello, all. Thank you guys for joining us on a Tuesday morning to talk a bit about hiring in Latin America. My name is Aaron Bailey. I head up the partnerships team at a venture capital firm in a city called 500 Startups. We actually have two panelists with us today who we both partner with here at 500, Carol and Sergio. Would you guys mind introducing yourselves?
Sure. Thanks, Aaron. I appreciate the introduction and thanks for moderating today. My name is Carolina Mello. I'm with Safeguard Global and I'm the Regional Alliance Manager for the West Coast of the United States.
And I'm Sergio Nouvel. I'm co-founder and CEO of Get On Board. Get On Board is a recruitment platform for tech professionals. We started out in Latin America and we have seen great expansion into North America lately.
Good. So we're going to be covering a lot of ground today. So I want to encourage you all to be dropping questions in the Q&A. I'll try to catch them for follow-ups, but we'll leave some time at the end as well for to make sure every question is covered. So we'll just jump right into it then. So Carol, I'm actually going to start with you here. So when companies are thinking about hiring overseas, the first thing that comes to mind is usually like hiring a contractor or establishing some sort of company entity. Given your work at Safeguard, talk us through how you actually think about making those first hires abroad.
Yeah, sure. So I think the contractor and the entity has been a well-known route for companies. You know, sometimes they're looking for a project specific, or they just don't know how long the project's going to last. So they go to the contractor route, you know, which, I mean, it can be a good route. It just depends on how you're managing it. So the reason why I say this is because in many countries, if you pass a certain amount of hours per week of employment and they're essentially allocating most of their time to your company, I believe as little as 25 in a lot of countries, up a week, 25 hours up, that could be considered a full-time employment. Definitely if they're working 40 hours a week, in all countries that is considered full-time employment because they're working for one company only, and therefore that usually doesn't apply to contractor role, essentially regulations in that country. So it really depends on what you're doing. I think it's a viable option, but people really have to look in how they're doing it. And I think companies sometimes lose sight of the amount of time the contractor is putting in, and then they end up on those sticky situations. Usually, you know, we see within our business that around 60% of contractors that come to the solution are usually out of compliance. So that's a pretty high number, 60%. You know, another option that they have is obviously setting up an entity, which I think most folks are familiar with, which is really going into a country, you know, hiring lawyers or using a essentially a company in the box kind of companies that deliver a full entity and operationalize them. But then again, a lot of people don't know how long they're going to be there for. Sometimes it's only one or two people in country. So they don't want to go to the whole process of setting it up before they're ready to really see if the market's going to be a good fit for them. So that's why I think the employer of record comes to play. You know, Safeguard is one of the providers that does employer of record, but we also have a lot of others in the market that do the same thing. And the employer of record is essentially a company like ours that is registered or works with partners, you know, in our case, 179 countries, where you are employing the employer in the employer of record. So you don't need to set up an entity. They're not a contractor because they're on their full, like, employment contract. It can be, you know, short-term employment contract. It can be a long-term employment contract. It can be hourly, but essentially they're employed by the employer of record, which means that the company doesn't have to go ahead and set up entity, and then is not also exposed to some of the issues with misclassification of contractors. So what the employer of record does is really like, it's brought into the platform, and then from there on, the employer of record will run taxes, payroll, compliance, and it'll really be like an outside HR arm of the company, so to say. And everything is done by the employer of record. So really the client is only left with having to figure out, you know, okay, we're going to play the employer of record and then we're going to manage day-to-day activities. So it brings folks a third solution, you know, that is not contractors or entity setup. So it's something else to consider.
Yeah, maybe actually, this is a good segue into, can you just give us an overview of Safeguard's model as a whole and how it's kind of different from others out there? You answered a little bit of that, but it'd be good to get into that.
Yeah, so essentially, Safeguard works as an employer of record, just like others in the market. And what we do is once the client, has, it might be one resource, it might be 100, 200 people that they want to hire overseas, but they don't want to do an entity setup. So essentially, Safeguard hires, the people for them in that country, and then really, they pay Safeguard. Safeguard pays the professional overseas, and then does all the compliance, all the payroll, benefits, taxation, and everything that is involved with the HR side of the employment. And then all the client does is like manage day-to-day activities. So essentially the contract to be a Safeguard contract, but they render services to the end client. Some clients get confused about that because they're like, well, my professional still wants to be attached to my business, meaning, LinkedIn, resumes, emails, and business cards, but that will still be all tied up to the end client. It's literally employer of record in the eyes of the local government. So the local government knows that, they're employed by a company that is able to employ them in that country and do all the compliance and regulation that it takes for the employment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So for 500 Startups, we're the first institutional money into companies actually like Get On Board, which was a previous badge company. Like, what is the safest, cheapest way to make those first couple hires in, say, Latin America for tech talent, let's say? How would that work? How do they even think about, okay, I want to make my first hire. I'm just going to go to Upwork, or I'm just going to go to Get On Board and hire people. They're thinking about compliance. Typically, people aren't even thinking about compliance. So what's a good solution for them? How do they work that out?
So really is, what they're willing to do, and it's really project-based, right? They need to look at their international strategy and figure out, am I going to need a resource for 10 hours a week for the next 6 months, right? I think that's how they decide that first. If they're going to go in 50 employees, in an office in the UK, for example, or in Brazil or Argentina, they should probably figure out, I need to start an entity right away because, it's going to grow so fast that an employer of record, sure, they can still use it, but it's the most cost effective, right? So it's really a case-to-case, a case-by-case basis on the client side. And I think that's pretty standard. It's just figuring out their international strategy first, their growth plan, and then applying that to Latin America market and where they might want to set up, and then look into the regulation for setting up entity there and when they trigger a tax nexus. And then there's a whole set of lists that come after that. But it would be about what their plan is, really, what they're going to need.
Okay, and additional follow-up question here. So this is kind of a COVID-related question. Majority of businesses are obviously now remote first. What trends are you seeing now that company workforces are remote, and kind of have you seen a shift in how they're actually managing their employees or kind of hiring attitudes?
Yeah, definitely. So I think there's a big shift because not only they're doing remote different, they're realizing, okay, how much FaceTime do we need? Are we using platforms like Zoom? What is our strategy, making people informed across the company? I find that it was a lot of phone calls before, and people are really trying to do more FaceTime now. And also for us, what we're seeing is a lot of the professionals that had relocated to a different country to work on headquarters or something else are moving back to their home country because they want to be maybe close to family, or, for other reasons. They're like, if I don't need to be here physically, why not come back to my country of origin? So actually what we've seen a lot in the last couple of months is companies redirecting that, allowing people to go back home from headquarters or from the office that they used to work at, and now, work from other countries. And because of that, it opened their eyes to, we were really stuck on hiring people just on this little bubble, and now we can go outside of that. And that would be better for us financially. In some markets, it's really hard to recruit. So tech talent is very scarce in a lot of markets. So it's like, how do you go to a different market now and look for that tech talent? And Latin America, a great example we're talking about today, is a very rich market for tech resources, a very qualified ones. So, it also helped them, the current employees that they were managing, but also open their eyes to the entire world that's available to them for hiring.
Cool. This is actually going to be a follow-up question for Sergio. Are you seeing trends since COVID hit towards technical teams and hiring folks in LATAM?
I think it's been a mixed bag. From one side, I think there's a lot of companies that are already ready for remote, or they were remote before the pandemic, and I think those are the ones that have benefited the most from all of this, because from one side you got big tech companies like Airbnb or Uber laying off lots of people. So those people are being captured right now by these companies. So I think those companies already took the time to get set straight all the logistic things, and many of them resort to a company such as Safeguard and other even maybe set up their own local entities. So I think still what we're observing right now is these already hugely established companies that are hiring as usual, and they're expanding their talent pools naturally. And we also get the other extreme, which is small startups that need to add a couple of people to begin accelerating building. And they are looking at Latin America, and as Carol says, sometimes they hire people as contractors or temporarily, and just trying to get away with it. So I would say that there's still a big wave of companies that are currently working remotely that are considering it, but they're still not actively hiring remotely. They're open to the idea. They are more comfortable with the format. But many of them are, for instance, if they're based in the US, they're still looking for candidates within the US. And the reason tends to be usually logistics and HR and everything else related to hiring a person. It's obviously more known to them. And that's the main reason. But I think we are still yet to observe this huge wave of companies really leveraging the global potential of remote work.
Great. Yeah, so Get On Board and Safeguard are obviously partnering together now. Can you talk about why you decided to join forces and how this partnership can kind of unlock the LATAM talent pool?
Sure. So
Either of you.
Sergio, would you like to start, or?
Well, I think it was a natural partnership. It made sense just a couple of seconds after we start talking about it, because I would say one of the huge barriers to hiring in Latin America is actually fragmentation. Not only complexity. I mean, hiring people in the US is not easier than anywhere else. But the thing is, the North American market tends to be much more consolidated, so there's less complexity to navigate, even if different states might have some differences. But all in all, I think that everything is pretty uniform in comparison to what happens in Latin America, where neighbors might have wildly different policies for contracting people and benefits and insurance requirements, and all the payroll extra, all the payroll overhead may be completely different, varying from Mexico to Chile to Argentina to Colombia to Peru, and also the political situations are different. So even how much does a dollar buy is completely different depending on the country. So I think all the fragmentation has been so hard to navigate, and that's what I love so much about what Safeguard do, which is flattening this complexity and absorbing all this friction. So the experience and everything involved in hiring a person depends a lot less on knowing specific local labor laws or legislation. So at least from our point of view, it's a huge enabler, because part of what Get On Board does is precisely to flatten Latin America. So you're not restricted anymore. Oh, I am a startup from Chile, so I only am enabled to look people from Chile, I can start looking talent in Peru and Mexico and Colombia and anywhere else. But it's hard to take it to practice precisely because all the complexities and all the unknowns. So the way we are giving access for the whole Latin American talent pool is what Safeguard is doing from the point of view of complexities and payroll and compliance in each country.
Yeah, and on our end, I would say, it's a great marriage because although we can employ, we can't really recruit. We don't have, the skill set, or as a company, we haven't focused on recruitment. It's not something that we do currently, and I don't think we ever will for the foreseeable future, especially not, in Latin America, because you need to really be an expert, and Get On Board does a wonderful job in providing these resources all in one place. They can use the platform to advertise what they need, and put it out there so people can apply, but they also do recruitment themselves. If the client wants to go ahead and use the recruitment services, so they can use it as a job board, they can use it as a direct recruitment agency, if they want to, with a specialized service. And really the level of tech resources that you're getting from Get On Board is really amazing, because they have all these people. They have not only a lot of skill set in the tech world within Latin America, but these people are very qualified. I think historically, being from Brazil and, being part of that market, we're seeing that there's a lot of unemployment in countries in Latin America, and people have to try 3 times as hard to get a job. So usually they are overqualified for most jobs, but there's just not enough of it in their country of residence. So it's really great to see that companies can access the market and get incredible talent that they might not otherwise be able to get in their country if, there's not as many people needing jobs. So I think that really opens a whole, new avenue for our clients, not only the US, all over Latin America, Europe coming into Latin America, all over the world, to really see what Latin America has to offer. And then obviously, the time zone, I work with a lot of US clients that really tends to work well for them. So I think there's a lot of pluses, and it just seemed like a natural thing for us to go at it together on the Latin America market, just because people come to us and say, it's great that you can employ, but can you recruit? And we're like, no, but we get somebody, we Get On Board now. So now we can do those things that we weren't able to do before. And we're confident that our clients will be well taken care of. And that's really how the partnership took place.
Cool. Yeah. So this one is actually kind of a follow-up to you, Carol. I've heard you talk about this before, but how are speed and scalability changing the landscape for companies that are looking to expand operations internationally? Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So we can talk about the 2 routes that were previously available to company, which is contractor, and entity setup. The most normal ways, let's just call it that way. So contractor, that's pretty fast. You can go on different platforms and contract to somebody. If you already know a resource, you can definitely action that. And we see people doing international wires to pay them, different ways. As we mentioned before, the problem with that is that compliance part. So you really need to watch out for that, but it's a fairly fast solution, right? When we go to entity setup, then you can take, anywhere from 3 months, but I wouldn't count that for Latin America. I'm mostly talking about some European countries that can be really fast. We view that, we know that from experience, that people that have used some of our partners that do actually entity setup, in some of the countries they can go for 3 months. It's very fast. I actually opened an entity in Brazil for one of the companies that I work for, and it took me about 6 months just to get a bank account. So, and then until, you set up an entity, who knows? So there's a lot of, moving parts to entity setup in Latin America specifically. So being conservative, I would say anywhere from 6 months to a year and a half. Depending. So you really would wait a while until you can get your operations up and going. And, with the EOR solution, which is the employer of record, you can really be live in 2 to 4 weeks. You know, some of the countries might take a little bit longer because of the things you have to do in order to employ, you know, and all the paperwork that, you know, you have to receive in country from the professional. But 2 to 4 weeks is really fast. Taking into consideration that is a solution that is compliant and there's a local contract attached to that. You know, it's not a contractor relationship. So it really gives companies the ability to enter market without having a headache, like, oh, am I employing this person correctly? Like, am I under the certain amount of hours it takes in country? Do I going to get into a lawsuit? Because Latin America is very known for lawsuits. People do sue companies, you know, obviously not while their employees, tends to be like after they leave or if they get dismissed, then there's all these things that they're going to claim back. And it's usually a very complicated way of dealing with it. Like if you wait until the end of the employment to say, you know, I really was a full-time employer, but I was employee, but I was getting paid as a contractor, that's an issue, right? So the speed and the scalability that you can do is that. So 2 to 4 weeks is a lot faster than entity setup, and then it's compliant, right? So then we're talking about speed. And scalability is the fact that you can just keep adding people. Like it's up to the companies when they're going to decide that employer of record is something that they need to move out of and into an entity. And that can happen at different points. Some companies, you know, they might even have 20, 30, 40 people, which is some of our clients in the country. They still don't want to set up. Of course, for some of them, setting up might be the best option, you know, for their dollar. So that varies, but overall is something that it gives them access to market much faster, you know, and they can scale. It can be one person. I think I mentioned that before, and it can be 50, it can be 200. So just really nimble solution.
So this is, we've talked about this before, but I'd like for you to talk about this a bit here, Carol. What are like some horror stories of like, if I start a company and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to hire a couple people in Latin America and not worry about compliance? Because early stage founders, that's like not top of mind. Like, what's the worst that could happen? Walk us through like horror stories.
So the worst is really, really bad. The worst is a huge lawsuit, and it's thousands of dollars that company has to pay. There's something like, so we try to minimize our liability too, right? So we do our due diligence. If we get a client that for whatever reason was employing somebody in Latin America as a contractor for years, and they send an offer letter with their company letterhead to a contractor in Latin America, let's say like 10 years ago, let's increase that to make like a worst case scenario, right? And now 10 years later, and this person been working 40 hours a week, right? Now 10 years later, they decide that they're gonna terminate this employment because they no longer need that resource. Well, they have an offer letter and they have proof, email, everything that they've been working for this company full-time. They're getting the wires in the bank because they're paying wire. And then suddenly this company didn't follow the regulations in the country, didn't pay any taxes, didn't claim this person as a full-time employee for 10 years. And then this person is saying, I was an employee the whole time and never got any benefits. Well, then you need to go back 10 years and pay everything that they were owed for those 10 years, not even counting on each country in Latin America is going to be different, but what they're going to have to pay in like taxes or, you know, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to go down into that hole right now, but you can see how it adds up. So much so that we always ask people coming in, like if it is a contractor, existing contractor, we ask, you know, how long ago they started, you know, and in some instances we might consider, you know, it doesn't happen often, but if it's something like we know it's a very high chance of a lawsuit, we might not even employ them for companies, because once we get involved, then we get sued with them, right? Because we are the employer of record. So it's just, you know, we do our due diligence to make sure that people are aware ahead of time what their options are, and just try to not misclassify their contractors if that's the route they choose to go. So, you know, it can be anything, but you know, there are some
So
horror
if I'm
stories.
in the US though, if I'm in the US and I hire some people in Uruguay or Brazil, like how do they just chase after me, and do I have to pay if I'm a founder?
So you'll get sued, right? So you get sued. I'm not sure, like I said, I'm not a lawyer, but we had heard some horror stories from our client coming in and saying, I got a compliance letter. Like, and now I'm having to figure out how I'm going to do this. Like, I have this, like, I don't know the ins and outs of what the letter looks like, or like I said, I'm not a lawyer, but we had some clients coming to us saying, I need your help because I got a letter and now I'm being exposed to like regulation in countries and these penalties, and it's not going to be good. Like, it's a lot of money and I need you to essentially bring this professional to compliance. Like, so it can vary. I'm sure Sergio probably know one or two horror stories, but without going too much into it, like I said, you know, there's all these things that can happen and people don't think it can hit them, but really it can, because we're all globalized now. So there's a way of finding you, especially if you're a known company, they're going to find you one way or the other, and they're going to want their dollars.
And I think not only the fear of a lawsuit should be the only thing to have in mind, or the only motivator. As a founder myself, I do know that when you are raising capital, and as you progress through the fundraising trail, the due diligence process expects that you have everything in order. And we have made those kinds of mistakes in the past, and we are still fixing them, because no one tells you at the beginning. No one tells you that you need to do things properly. And obviously, while you are starting up, you tend to do things like at the moment and improvise and take what you have in your hands. But the thing is, if a founder's plan is to continue raising money, due diligence is going to happen, and they are going to ask those questions, and they are going to look at your employment contracts and see that everything is in order. So, and not to mention the peace of mind that you give your team. And I want to stress that that's so important. And we have also made those mistakes to cause an employee some stress because we didn't manage things properly, because we didn't know at the beginning. So given the war for talent, and given how hard it is to find the right person, I think offering them something stable, something that is predictable for them, something that allows them to have proper insurance and everything that they need. It's so important. So even if a lawsuit is not really a risk, or even if everyone is working in the best spirits possible, I think from the point of view of communicating this peace of mind to employees, and also be ready for due diligence, I think those are two huge reasons to make everything as it should be.
Great. So we're going to switch gears here a little bit. For Sergio, what was the catalyst for starting Get On Board? Like, why did you start this company?
Get On Board started because we had this thriving tech ecosystem that didn't get any spotlight, and it was so sad because and this is back in 2011, 2012 when we started, and there were already a thriving community of engineers and tech professionals and designers and growth hackers and entrepreneurs, and it was so hard for each other to find each other. So and yeah, while the community was small and everyone knew each other, so yeah, one person might have worked for 2 or 3 startups, and everyone were friends and play soccer and the weekends and all that. But as the community and the ecosystem grew, we started to realize that there was literally no place where cool startups and companies doing great technology in Latin America could be seen. And it was such a pity, because all the generic job boards were so filled with crappy jobs and jobs asking for unicorns, and jobs that didn't really understand how the technology talent market works, what to offer, and what to ask for. So that was the primary motivation, and that is still something we embody through moderating every single job that appears on Get On Board. So we go to great lengths to ensure that every single job meets quality standards, and we still do, even at the cost of having less jobs posted in Get On Board than elsewhere. But we are so committed to only have good jobs placed on Get On Board, because it's so important to both educate the market and set up a good example of what has to be offered, and also making things easier for professionals as well. I think we always talk about making things easier for recruiters, but usually professionals carry all the burden of having to apply through different systems and go through 100 interview processes and not having response, and also having to sort all the crap out of the jobs that they really want to apply and the jobs that are worth it. So all of this started in Chile, and then we realized that this was not a Chilean problem. This was a regional problem, because everywhere else, in Peru, in Argentina, Colombia, Mexico, and everywhere else, it was the same problem. There were so many talented people and really great entrepreneurs doing such cool stuff and building such great companies with the best mindset and the best culture, and they didn't have any place to be seen. So part of what motivates us so much is give these cool companies the spotlight so the great talent can find them. And obviously that mission now expands to the North American market, because basically people deserve to work someplace better. And it doesn't make sense that they have to be restricted by their geographical location, or that their birthplace has to be a handicap. And so it's so important that we continue removing barriers so everyone who has the right talent or who has the right potential can find somewhere to work. And many people that are just starting to join this tech workforce can find a path to do career development and to progress and to learn and to succeed. There's such a shortage of highly senior people everywhere, and this is true also in Latin America. But the thing is, there's so many people that, if given the chance, they would be able to learn and develop their careers, and all they need is a foot on the door. So we are trying to provide that as well, also for these high potential people.
Yeah, so you talked a bit about why the talent pool has been overlooked. What do you think the actual potential for the talent is? Like, where is it going?
I think, well, there's already so many Latin American talent that gets out of the Latin American market. They are in Silicon Valley now, even either physically or more increasingly remotely. They are already part of that ecosystem, and I think there's this huge pool of people that has this potential. And the gap is so tiny, and all they need is just the opportunity to continue advancing their career. So as Carol said, Latin America has a huge base of highly educated people. And if you combine the whole region, it's a 600 million region. So it's a lot of people, but up until now, all we could see was individual countries, because borders were so hard to cross. So that's part of what we are doing, and that's part of what excites us so much about this partnership, is that we finally can start looking at the region, as a unified market. And if you look at this market as a single market, there's so much talent to draw from, and there's so much high potential and people that in a couple of years are going to become super senior engineers and are going to help building technology.
Yeah, so we actually talked about this a bit yesterday, and Carol touched on a couple of these points, but can you talk about the differentiators for hiring in LATAM versus, say, Eastern Europe or India or other places in APAC? Pitch Latin America to us.
Make no mistake, good talent is everywhere, and we believe in that. But there's some huge benefits for North American companies looking at Latin America. One of them is the time zone alignment. I've heard so many entrepreneurs or team leaders that have part of their teams established in another time zone, and if you are not a completely asynchronous company, coordination is super hard. And you usually have to take meetings at 11 p.m. or your teams have to take meetings Sunday nights or Monday at 5 a.m. That is not unusual because obviously you want to rely less and less on real-time coordination. But the thing is that is hard to achieve, and even then you need a high degree of maturity. And for certain tasks and certain projects, it's just not viable. So Latin America and its time zone alignment, I think it's perfect for both the West and the East Coast in the US and in Canada to start looking at a broader talent pool. And obviously, you can arbitrage this cost of living differences, and that might be also relevant. Talking about the same person living in San Francisco is probably going to have to be paid triple to what
maybe
what
more
can be offered in.
Yeah, that's like top.
Maybe
of
more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and we're talking about the same person. We're not talking about, oh, there's more talented people here or there. It's just if you have to move that person because you have no other chance, you have to pay them triple, and not necessarily that drives up a higher quality of living. And so many people prefers to live by their families, or they can get more bang to their buck in a tiny city, or be in the countryside, or be near the beach, or whatever. And now they had a chance, and companies had the chance to have that talent and provide them with a really great standard of living, and taking advantage of these price differences. And I think that's even happening in the US right now. Everyone is going out of the Bay Area because they can have a three bedroom house elsewhere for the same price that they rent a single room apartment in San Francisco. So that's part of it. And obviously, for any company trying to access key talent, unlocking a new talent pool is so important. So for many companies, their final mix ends up being people from Eastern Europe, people from Southeast Asia, people from Africa, people from Europe, the US, and also Latin America. And the thing is, if you are really clear in what you need from your team and the culture you are trying to nurture, well, you have to be picky, and you can get to be picky if you have a broader talent pool to choose from. So just having this new option, I think, is huge. And for companies that are wanting to take the leap into remote and to realize the promise of global workforce, I think Latin America is a really great soft landing because it's the same time zone, so coordination can happen in real time. And I know that there are also trust issues because you're going to hire someone that is not from your culture, and that is true from everyone. So one of the things you want while you are getting started with that is being able to coordinate as much as possible and really establish this close relationship with these people that you might never have seen in person. So for all of those reasons, the possibility of coordinating real time and strengthen this relationship without having to sacrifice your daily schedule or your family time, I think it's great, and it's awesome. It's going to be really transformative.
Yeah, cost efficiency, ease of collaboration, the time zone thing, it's definitely a no-brainer, which is why I definitely am recommending LATAM, hiring in LATAM, and get on board to a lot of founders that come through 500, our accelerator. So this is another question to you, Sergio. What kind of positions are most successful for remote Latin American workers? And if there's just any data that you could give around like cost efficiencies, like say compared to San Francisco, like what do the salaries look like? And then also another question that I got before this was like, what % are English speaking, kind of in the region as a whole?
Let's talk about salaries first. Well, compared to Bay Area salaries, you can easily pay the same person a third of the cost. It's going to depend a lot on the country as well, and I think Carol can talk about that because overheads vary widely among countries, but still I think there's this order of magnitude between salaries. So that's one thing. And obviously, if you are not based in the Bay Area or New York City, and you might be in the Midwest or anywhere else, probably it's going to be a little less difference, but still significant. Regarding positions, well, we are open to any technology related positions, and we try to understand that as broadly as possible. Obviously, there's lots of positions that are relying on local knowledge. So I would say for remote working, especially for remote working to the US, there are certain positions that are better suited than others. One of them is obviously software engineering. And the level of demand is also the highest. So you literally want to have as broad as a talent pool as you can have. UX and design, I think it's one overlooked one. There's huge communities of awesome UX designers in Latin America, people that even might come from other disciplines like journalism or they were librarians. So they have this huge background of information architecture that is so important and so great. So I think UX talent is something greatly underlooked or overlooked, sorry, in Latin America. And now it's easier than ever for UX people to do remote research. So you don't have to be located in the market in order to do proper research. And well, design is design everywhere. Data science is another one. And these three main categories, I would say, cover probably 60% or 70% of what we offer in Get On Board and what you can find in Get On Board as talent. And an unexpected one is content creation. There's so many bilingual people and so many people that are able to create content both in English and in Spanish. And I think there's also a huge opportunity for companies that are expanding internationally and want to have a global footprint and want to have a footprint in Latin America. And it's so great that they can have these people. And I've heard from companies like Shopify that they are actively hiring, for instance, content creators and designers from Latin America because they want that understanding of those markets. So I think that might be a huge asset. Regarding English level, I would say probably half of our talent database, which is growing. Right now it's 150,000 people, but it's growing every month. I would say half of that, they are qualified English speakers, or at least they're able to fluidly communicate and have everyday work with no friction. And I would say the more asynchronous a company gets, the less they rely on Zoom and video calls, the easier is precisely to incorporate these people, because obviously writing is a bit easier than having to talk and speak on the spot. So I think that further flattens the gap and the difference, and enables more and more people to join these companies, despite maybe not being so fluent when in conversation, but they're able to establish conversations in written form. So I think that's a huge part of it that up until now was not such an accessible advantage.
Great. Well, we are at about 12 minutes left, and I think these two are happy to take any questions that you all may have. So feel free to type some into the Q&A function, and we will be reading those out loud. Did y'all have any questions for each other? Points that you think that either of you missed?
I was just going to add to what Sergio said as far as like social charges in each country, they vary greatly. And what I think is good is that, you know, if they don't need to be in a certain country for obvious reasons, they can take that into consideration prior to recruitment. So I always tell, you know, people that are coming in and saying, oh, I want to hire my tech team in Latin America. It's like, great. We can run a charge of like, you know, social charges. You can be familiar with what social charges are. So when you're making those choices, you can also take that into consideration, right? And obviously, employing compliantly is more expensive than not employing compliantly. So really, knowing those numbers ahead of time and being able to set up their plan according to the country that they want to hire in. So maybe they need to do adjustment internally to know, okay, in this country, you know, we're a higher percentage, but we still, because of the exchange rate, we're still going to come at this, right? So it's all a matter of them planning ahead. And I really like that Sergio touched into like the social charges of each country because they vary greatly in Latin America. So I think it's a good thing to know before you kind of like set on something on a specific country or location.
I wanted to ask Carol about the global payroll system that Safeguard has, because I do know that it's not only being the employer of record, it's also providing a platform to manage global payments. And I know firsthand that might be hugely painful if you have a 20-person team and you have to pay to send money to 5, 6, 7 different countries every month, and every single person needs a different way of transferring money, and you need to adjust for exchange rates, and there's a lot of hassle in that. So I'm curious to know more about how and tell the audience how Safeguard can help with that.
Yeah, so on the global managed payroll, you know, we talk about the employer of record, but there's also global managed payroll, which is essentially like managing all the international payroll for a company from a country. It can be an American company, it can be a Latin American company, European company. So global managed payroll help them consolidate. Like if they have entities, let's say in 10 countries, they're paying through 10 different providers. It's a way of consolidating those providers or making sure that it's all ran into one platform, right? So that platform, essentially, you can manage your global payroll. It doesn't include like, you know, benefits, and the company still has to do, you know, their own compliance, their own taxation, as far as their entity taxation, but we do like we run all the payroll on, we call it GMP for global managed payroll. So that's also an option as companies transition out of employer of record and maybe they want to set up an entity. You know, there is a certain amount of countries that it takes to make it efficient for them. Otherwise, you know, it doesn't justify, because we have a whole implementation that takes place that we need to put into the system, and there's a lot of work that goes behind implementing that. So that tends to be more like a mid-sized company to enterprise-sized solution, simply because, you know, we're literally moving all of their operations into one integrated system. So it's usually not worth for smaller companies, but definitely something to mid-size to enterprise that we do to help like keep all global payroll in one place.
Great. And how can people reach you if they have questions, both of y'all?
So for me, I can, you know, my email is carolmello@safeguardglobal.com. So, and also people can reach out to me via LinkedIn at Carolina Mello. So if they have any questions, you know, happy to assist folks. So yeah, those would be the 2 best ways of contacting me.
Sergio?
Same for me. Same for me. I'm findable in over LinkedIn and also over email. I'm Sergio at getonbrd.com.
Getonbrd.com. Cool.
Yes.
Thank you both for taking the time today. Really appreciate it. And I think this is recorded, so people can watch it later if they want to share it around. Great. Have a good rest of your day.
It is.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Harry, for moderating. It's been great conversation.
Yes.
Thank you, Carol.
No worries.
Thank you
No
both.
worries.
Have a wonderful day. Bye,
You too.
everybody.
Bye now.
Bye, everybody.